This is Expat Sandwich. I'm Marty Walker. So, what's that noise? It's called cacerolazo, or cacerolada. It's a form of protest by beating on pots and pans. It has a high level of participation because people can literally protest without leaving their homes. Cacerolazo comes from the Spanish word cacerola, which means stew pot, and the suffix azo or ada adds punching or striking to its meaning. And this particular sound was recorded and sent to me from Barcelona. Okay, so for a very quick overview, Barcelona is the second largest city in Spain. It's located in the self-governed region of Catalonia, which, by the way, has its own language, and it's also responsible for 20% of Spain's GDP. A long time ago, like in 1150, Catalonia was an independent region of the Iberian Peninsula. But since then, it's been granted autonomy twice. Once briefly in 1931, before military dictator Francisco Franco's rule, and then again in 1977, shortly after Franco's death. Okay, so back to the cacerolazo. Catalans were protesting the violent intervention of the Spanish government during their referendum for independence on October 1st. To say the Catalan push for independence is a moving target is putting it mildly. During the production of this recording, the Catalan parliament overwhelmingly declared independence.
Wild celebrations in Barcelona as Spain's richest region declares independence.
While just hours later, Spain's Senate gave new power to the Spanish government and imposed direct rule on Catalonia and then fired the Catalan government.
Spain's Prime Minister denouncing independence as a criminal act.
Spain's Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, announced that new elections would be held on December 21st. And if you're confused by all of this, you're not alone. In July, a survey backed by the Catalan government revealed that 41% were in favor of independence and 49% were opposed. On the day of the referendum, about 90% voted in favor of independence, while unionist parties urged voters to stay home. And even if you wanted to vote, many weren't able to because the Spanish police closed off the polling stations. Anti-separatists, as well as the Spanish government, claimed the referendum was illegal and that it violated Spain's constitution. So how did Spain and Catalonia get here? And what's been the big push behind the separatist movement? A big part of it is economic. One thing that happened was the economic collapse in 2008, which spiked the unemployment rate to 25%, more than twice the Eurozone average. Since then, luckily, Catalonia has managed to get that number down to 15%. And also, according to an article in The Atlantic, in 2010, the Spanish courts struck down parts of a referendum that gave Catalonia more autonomy over a broad range of issues, including allowing priority of the Catalan language over Spanish in their region. And finally, Catalans are angry because they feel like they give more in taxes than they get back from the government. Basically, they feel like they're propping up the rest of the country. But data also shows that it's Madrid with the biggest negative fiscal balance. Trying to make sense of all this, I couldn't help but think about California's current and ongoing attempt at secession. And because I live in Dallas, every time I hear something about Texas becoming its own country, it literally sends my eyeballs rolling to the back of my head. So what do Texas, California, and Catalonia all have in common? The groups calling for secession are being funded and fueled by the Kremlin, through an organization called the Anti-Globalization Movement of Russia. And its main goal is to fund and provide support to Western separatist groups, so they can destabilize the United States and Europe. This is accomplished by creating and distributing fake news, fake websites, and millions of social media accounts that can effortlessly turn lies into trending topics. So to help me better understand what it's like to live in Barcelona right now, I found an American expat who's lived there for over 17 years.
My name is Charity Blansit, and I live in Barcelona, Spain. I think a lot of the older generation has the memory of the dictator Franco. There's still a lot of people that they don't even know where their families are, family members that were killed during the dictatorship. And so there's a lot of emotional involvement. Then there's also a younger group that doesn't want to be a part of a kingdom anymore. You have a more of a sort of, I guess, anarchist perspective of wanting to be a republic and not wanting to be a kingdom. And then there's also, I think, business interest. Catalonia is a very wealthy province. And then just on a political level, the Catalan government wants to be making its own governmental rules. And there's also a big group that's totally unrepresented. They're not in a position that they want to vote for the separation of Catalonia because of the way it has come into being in an illegal way. And then there's also a lot of people that have a discussion of it was the only way to get to this point because Catalonia has tried many times to get to this discussion and hasn't been allowed to have the right to vote. And yeah, there are a lot of people who get into heated discussions around me continuously about what to do. It's also very tricky on an economic level because of the banks involved and the European Union and what does it represent to businesses and even people who live here. And if it's not recognized by the European Union, what does that mean to people living outside of Europe? What kind of rights would a person who's not Catalan have inside of Catalonia?
Speaking of the EU, when the Spanish currency, the peseta, was converted to the euro in 2002, its value was around 60%. And this attracted a ton of real estate investment from other countries, many who purchased vacation homes. Others bought up multiple flats to rent out to tourists through companies like Airbnb and HomeAway. And as a result, it's displaced a lot of the locals by driving up the cost of rent and real estate. Charity lives in a neighborhood called Gracia, which is between Barcelona's two biggest tourist attractions.
It's in between Sagrada Familia and Park Güell, to give you sort of a monumental reference. It's a great neighborhood to live in. There's a lot of streets that are semi-peatonal, which means that cars can only go down them at certain times, or if you live in the neighborhood, there's this massive influx of people who want to live in Barcelona because it's just a really nice place to live. It really is. But it's getting extremely crowded. Its normal living residential accessibility has been displaced with tourism.
In an opinion poll conducted by the city last June, Barcelona residents declared tourism to be the number one problem, even beating out a high unemployment rate. It's not that the residents are ungrateful for tourism or hate tourists. It's just that they want it regulated so it doesn't destroy their city and turn it into a theme park. Barcelona has a little over 1.5 million residents, and they share their city with 30 million tourists a year. It's a tough mix when, if you're a local, you've got to get up early and go to work each day. And what makes it really hard to sleep is when you're surrounded by people who are partying all night long, either in the streets or next door to you in your own building. The city's beginning to address this by slapping hefty fines like $500,000 on home rental sites like Airbnb and HomeAway if they're caught renting apartments that don't have a permit with the city. Then there's the infamous YouTube video of the naked Italians walking around in Barcelona that has prompted the city to pass laws to allow the police to start ticketing drunk and naked tourists. Many residents are moving to the outer edges of the city to get away from tourists as well as for the lower cost of living.
Here in your neighborhood, depending on the day that it is, you can put out things that you don't want that don't necessarily belong into the normal trash. I've always been fascinated by that since I guess there's no garage selling here, so it's kind of like my free garage sale night. Every Monday night, I just walk around to see what people have thrown out of their house. So it really feels like some kind of great adventure, scavenging at night.
Due to its infinite sources of inspiration, Barcelona is an incredible place to live as an artist.
I've always done a lot of installation work. I'm fascinated as an artist as the communication that exists in a city. It's constant communication, especially coming from Missouri, where my life was trees. I had thousands of trees, and here I have thousands of people.
Okay, I need to mention here that Charity grew up near my hometown, Springfield, Missouri, which, if you've been following this podcast, you're aware of the evolving nature of Springfield's seemingly 6 degrees of separation. Okay.
But as far as the contemporary art world, I would say is really just booming in the last 5 years. The city in general has opened up and broadened, even in what kind of bread you can buy. When I first got here, it was just white bread. There's a lot more galleries now. There's even a group that has formed to have a gallery weekend. Also, a art fair has begun. It's definitely trying to open itself up artistically to an international crowd. And I think the international crowd is coming here too. It wasn't possible to be as international as it is now. So how do you go from growing up in Walnut Shade, Missouri, to living in Barcelona? It wasn't a choice that I thought that I ever wanted to go there and do something or make something of my life here. And because I came at a situation of having a lover here that quickly became a very solid boyfriend, that quickly became my husband. This friend called me and asked me if I would come and meet him in Europe. And at that time, I didn't have a passport. And I was getting ready to walk out the door the following day. My plan was to go with a friend of mine down to Mexico. I said, yes, I'll meet you in Europe. Where are you going to be in 2 weeks? And he said, I'm probably going to be in Spain in 2 weeks. And so I said, okay, I meet you in Madrid in 2 weeks. I'm going to get a ticket and I'll keep you informed. And I went that next morning. Got a rushed passport, which meant I had to send my driver's license to Chicago, I think, or something like that. Went to Mexico without any form of identification. They let me across the border. Was it bravery? I don't know. I don't know if that was bravery. Got myself a ticket to Madrid. Flew out of New York, arrived in Madrid and sat and waited for my friend to show up. I just came on a one-way ticket and my friend and I traveled around Spain a little bit, went down into Morocco. Coming out of Morocco, I met Ricard on the train heading from Bobadilla, which is the last train stop in the south of Spain. So I came without ever having desired to come to Spain. I never even thought about wanting to go to Spain. I could count to 10 in Spanish, and I stayed for 2 weeks. And then I just got a ticket home, having fallen in love with Ricard and with plans of how do I live in Spain. In the beginning, I went back and forth between Spain and the United States a lot, because there were times where I just couldn't take it anymore. I was just overwhelmed. When I needed comfort and family, I did that several summers. Especially then, the level of communication doesn't exist like it does now. That's at least comforting that you can communicate back home very easily now. But yeah, there's just kind of a lonely, desperate feeling that sinks in at some point of just wanting to be with something you understand completely all the time.
Most people, when they move to a new country, have to learn only one new language. In Charity's case, it was 2.
My close world, most of them were speaking in Catalan. But I chose to study the Castellano from the very beginning because it was more versatile, because I also met a lot of international people who our common language is Castellano, not Catalan. I strongly recommend people to just focus on language from the very beginning. I just threw myself in, and I've never properly studied. People always are loving making jokes about the way I talk. And I think that's one of the most important things, is that if you're going to talk badly like me, then you might as well enjoy it, because everybody else will. Spanish verbs, trying to keep those straight. And also the gender, everything has a gender. I remember one time reading Sedaris talking about going to France and trying to marry everything so it could make sense of like the ladder marrying the TV, or the carpet marrying the fork, or it's really complicated. First Christmas dinner. So chicken in Castellano is pollo with an O at the end. If you say polla in the feminine sense, it actually means the male genitalia. At Christmas, when I asked for more male genitalia, it was like a really gut buster, like spitting wine across the table moment.
And to clarify, Charity contacted me afterwards to let me know that she hesitated to say this during the interview, but polla means dick. Now, on with the show.
That was embarrassing. When I do speak Catalan as a foreigner, it feels like people just like turn and stare at me like, wow, she's an American girl speaking Catalan. That's amazing. And it's like, oh, shoot. I didn't want to be amazing right now. I just wanted to get the bread.
Besides dealing with the language difficulties, there were also social norms to be learned.
The city life is still something that is a challenge for me.
Spain, the people love to be outside of their homes. One thing that took me a while to get used to is that people don't invite you to their homes as often as they invite you to meet somewhere outside of their home. So you would meet in a plaza or in a cafe, somewhere other than in people's homes. And at first it felt kind of like, oh, they maybe don't want me to go to their home or something. Like maybe they're not comfortable with me. And it's not really the case. It's just they love being outside. And I think that's also something else that makes me feel really safe in this country, is that there is a rare moment where I would be walking down the street by myself, even in the middle of the night, even at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. There's always somebody in the street, which kind of gives a sense of safety by numbers and community awareness.
I mean, sometimes I feel uneasy when I'm in the downtown area just because of the mass of people. Not because of the threat of the people, but just the massiveness of how many people are in one space makes me feel uneasy.
And then this happened.
Screams and panic tonight on Barcelona's most famous pedestrian street.
A van plowed through Barcelona's most popular pedestrian boulevard, La Rambla, killing 13 people and injuring more than 80 others. Here's how this played out for Charity that day.
That was a very strange day for me. Because that morning, my neighbor had communicated with me that a woman from Springfield had spent the night with them last night, that they had randomly came across her on a train, and she was couch surfing. She stayed with them. I met her in the morning, helped her get a few things figured out. I sent her to the center. From there, she went about her day, which happened to be within 10 feet of that attack happening. She was registered in CPR because she's a teacher and was there helping people, which was just a big shock of having met somebody from Missouri and then having them be involved with something so dramatic. We had made plans that she would come back to my house to eat dinner, and when she showed up, she had blood on her, and so I just took her things and threw it in the washing machine, and had dinner with this woman. It was very surreal as well because having children at the table was very healing because there wasn't any time to do very much mourning or recapturing. It was just this force of moving forward in a way. We didn't have much time to talk about it, actually, which I think maybe that was helpful for her as well, not to have to rehash it too much. And somehow it was more shocking that it came from a young group that, according to most of the people that knew about their lives, were very surprised. Not that it makes it better, but somehow when it's the martyr and you know the story and it fits, somehow it's easier to digest.
You would think with all of the world-famous cathedrals and the dominance of Catholicism that the people of Spain would be extremely religious. But according to the Eurobarometer report in 2008, only 3% consider religion as their 3 most important values, while the European mean sits at about 7%.
In the United States, you would see the parking lots full, or you would know the people who are going to church and you would know the people who weren't. And here it doesn't. I can't even see any difference on Sunday of what's going on. I just feel like there's a lot less moral repression in Spain than there is in the States. I don't know who goes to church and who doesn't go to church. Really, I have no idea. It's very private. People don't pressure or ask you anything about your religious beliefs.
One of the perks of living in Spain is healthcare.
It's all my husband and I do use is social medicine. We don't have private medicine. Both of his parents are doctors. They have both also worked in private medicine, but the majority of their time where they like to be is inside of the social medicine system. Their opinion is that the care and the doctors are really high standard inside of social medicine. I have never had to wait a long time. I've heard of some situations, maybe of people having some complications of maybe not being able to get into the exact center they want to be in. But I've also heard that being a situation in the United States. So I don't think it's necessarily an issue of being social medicine. And you always hear this fear of, if you have social medicine, you're going to have to wait forever. You're not going to have the same level of care. And it is absolutely not true in Spain.
Knowing that Charity grew up near Springfield, I was curious to know what kind of food she misses the most.
I love biscuits and gravy. The people here, they just can't really understand. They're just like, oh, that's disgusting. It's so gross. I love eating a huge breakfast. Here, it's just like some bread with marmalade on top, a croissant with maybe some little piece of jamon on the inside of it, and a coffee. It's like, oh, give me a huge breakfast.
And you know, I'm always interested to know what books expats are reading.
Well, the last book I read in English, which was before when I was pregnant and I had time to read, was A Natural History of the Senses by Diane Ackerman. That book's brilliant if you've never read that book. And then I always pick up and try to read through. It's a book called Guadalajara by Kim Munzo. And it's in Catalan. The fact that the book is surreal helps me with the language. I've never read that book all the way through, but I always pick it up and try to get through it.
Mom, it's not Tweety, because that's just the campanas.
That's Charity and Ricard's daughter, Una. She's 5.5. So when Christmas comes around, this is how they roll.
The Catalan culture is very scatological. There's a lot of references to poop. And they have this thing called the caganer, which is the shitter, that it goes behind the nativity scene every Christmas. A caganer, which is this man squatting down, pooping.
She's right. El caganer began in the 19th century, and it was believed that by creating feces in the ground of the nativity scene, it would be fertilized, ensuring that the nativity scene would return the next year.
Then also the Catalan celebration of Christmas involves a log that poops gifts. And they have a song that they have this stick that they beat in front of the log saying, poop, log, poop. If you don't poop, we'll hit you with this stick.
That log is referred to as cagatillo, which translates as pooping uncle. The children are expected to take care of cagatillo by feeding the log, so that on Christmas Day, he'll poop out lots of presents. When that day comes, the children are instructed to either go out of the room several times to practice their song or pray for lots of presents, while the adults put small gifts under the log's cape. Then the children come back into the room, sing their song, and beat the log with a stick, finding presents under the cape.
I actually tried to take that tradition home to Missouri, and I scared the heck out of my niece. She was petrified of the log being inside the house at night with something in it, like a spirit that was going to poop out things in the morning.
That's going to wrap it up for us. If you'd like to learn more about Charity Blansit, you can find her at somanyprojects.com. Special thanks goes to NBC, the BBC, and the Telegraph for use of the news clips. Links to these sources and more can be found in our show notes on our website at www.expatsandwich.com. A very special thanks to Patreon members Louise Walker, Tim Hurst, Jay Shen, and @Honorable Husband. We are incredibly appreciative of your generous support. And if you're a fan of the show and want to know how you can help us out, head on over to patreon.com/expatsandwich to make a donation. You can also leave us a review on iTunes. You know, I gotta say, it's really nice to get feedback from our listeners. And many thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate you. Expat Sandwich is produced by Marty Walker.
Show the camera what it is.
Mr. Wonderful!
What is that?
I don't know.